Well, welcome back to What We Didn't Say on Sunday. It has been a long hiatus, really about a 2-month hiatus, but Pastor David and I are back. We're here to share with you our sermon leftovers from Sunday morning. That's the purpose of this podcast. There are things every week when we preach, there are things we don't get to, things that are left on the cutting room floor, and we're coming to you finally, once again, to share with you those things, to let you know what we didn't say on Sunday. Hey, Pastor David.
Jordan, it's good to be back.
We are here.
Yeah.
It's been about 2 months since we recorded. And in that time, a lot has happened.
Yeah.
Summer has flown by. Tomorrow, we're recording on Monday. Tomorrow is August.
That's hard to believe. Yeah.
August of 2023. And we're looking forward to a great fall. So it's here. I mean, fall is here.
When did fall ever begin in August?
I guess that's fair.
But we call it fall because they keep backing school up.
That's right.
So
fall
if they
semester.
back it up to July 1st,
we'd still call it fall.
we'd call it fall because it's just it's ingrained in us.
That's fair.
Like homing pigeons. That's
Homing?
the only.
Is it homing or is it honing?
Homing.
With an M.
I believe so. Honing pigeons.
Producer Bo, can you help us out? Can we get a Google search on that?
I've been saying it wrongly a long time. Then
I'm honestly curious. Well, how was Sunday?
Sunday was great. It was great to be back, and
you were out for 2 Sundays.
I was out for 2 Sundays.
What were you doing?
Well, the first Sunday was the Sunday following a wedding for my son. We had a lot of visitors in town, so it just was great to take that Sunday. And then then we went on a vacation the following Friday, and so we were away on a cruise.
Ooh.
Now, I don't know if you've done much cruising. You've been on a cruise?
I've done a little bit of cruising.
So my goal was not to gain 20 pounds.
18.
Only about 10. So I think I came in at like 4.
Wow.
I did okay. I've only gained 4 pounds.
That's impressive.
So,
and it was a week-long cruise, right?
Oh, yeah, it was a week-long cruise. But every day I did some exercise, and I just kind of saved up my calories during the day for dinner, and then I cut loose.
You have to.
Had some great dinners.
You have endless entrees.
Yeah, you can do that. But I've grown beyond that. My endless entree eating days, that's more your age.
Sure.
When I was your age, I did that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's why I'm decaying at the rate I am now. So don't go for the endless carcinogens, the endless sugar.
We have an answer.
We have an update. It is the homing
with an M.
With an M. They're also called male pigeons or messenger pigeons.
Wait. Oh, male like M-A-I-L.
All right.
Yes.
Male.
Mr.
Okay.
Producer, I'd like you to Google something else because we had this discussion on the cruise that a pigeon is the same thing as a dove. Identical to a dove. Is that true?
Well, I think they're the same species, right?
They're derived from the wild rock dove.
Wow.
The homing pigeon.
So the pigeon is a dove. My thing is that pigeons live in cities. Doves, a pigeon outside of a city is a dove.
Well, I think what we call a dove.
You don't go pigeon hunting.
They look different though, right? Like a pigeon is multicolored. When I think of a dove, I think solid white.
Well, there's white doves. No, there's gray doves.
Oh, here we go. All species and breeds of pigeons have 80 chromosomes, while all species and breeds of doves have 76 or 78 chromosomes.
I stand corrected.
Wow.
Because today, chromosomes matter. So
that's right.
Chromosomes, I'm going with that.
There we go. They're different.
A pigeon is not a dove.
But they are in the same taxonomic family.
There we go.
So they're taxed the same.
Yeah.
They're taxed the same rate.
You know, we cannot get our entire family in a taxi. It is... It will not fit an entire... Isn't that what you said?
A great segue.
Yeah.
You was talking about taxes.
He said taxonomy or something like that. And
taxonomic.
So the dove and the pigeon...
Ride in the same taxi.
They're in the same taxi.
That's right. So is your family.
And my family. We're in the same taxonomy.
But you can't
We're
get
human
in the same
beings,
taxi.
but not in the same taxi.
Too big. Too many kids.
I'm raring to go today. You can tell.
You've been waiting.
I've been waiting.
Anything else you want to talk about before we dive in?
I've got lots that I could have shared yesterday from my wedding experience, from the cruise experience.
Yeah.
I got loads of good sermon illustrations, but I don't want to give them away.
Can you share some with me? And
I will.
I'll pretend like they happened to me.
I thought of a real good one involving karaoke.
Oh, I can do that.
Yeah, because my family forced me to sing karaoke on a cruise ship, which I've denied them that over the last 3 or 4 years, and I'll have to tell you the karaoke experience. It was
If you tell me, if you will start sharing with me great sermon illustrations
yes,
from your life,
yeah,
what I'll do is I'll start recreating those moments in my life
so that they're real.
And then I can
Okay.
share them.
All
That's
right.
actually a pretty good plan.
Yeah.
Andrea's like, why are we going to sing karaoke tonight? It's for the sermon, Andrea. Sermon prep. All right. Well, hey, this Sunday we preached on Hebrews 11, verses 23 through 28, this testimony of Moses and his parents and their faith, and so much to talk about there. And I had a great time preaching on this text. It's just rich. So let's begin like we do every time by giving a 3-minute sermon recap of our sermons from Sunday morning. You said you had 5 long bullet points.
I
This is
did.
going to be hard for you.
I did.
Well, I think you can do it. 3 minutes or less, Pastor David. Share with
Okay.
us your sermon from Sunday morning, starting right now.
All right. So faith, all the great deeds of faith that are mentioned in chapter 11, actually all begin with great faith decisions. And in these 5 verses are really there are several key decisions that Moses made, and it's like the writer is trying to encourage the people that are reading this, many of them doubting Jews, doubting believers, people anticipate or considering Christ, and he says you're going to have to make some tough decisions, and your hero of the faith, Moses, did a lot of mighty deeds. But what's interesting is he doesn't talk about any mighty deeds in these verses. He talks about mighty decisions. And these are decisions of faith that he made. And the first decision really wasn't his, but when he was born, his parents set him up for a life of good decisions by making an incredible decision. And the point that I brought out was that faith always chooses God, chooses God over everything. And they had to make a choice, and they chose an active plan of obedience over passive destruction. And so I think faith always will choose obedient action over passive destruction. And there's a lot of application to parents that we have this responsibility. No matter what the government says or the educators say, ultimately we're responsible to focus on God's priority and protect our kids and make some decisions of faith that set our kids up. So the first one was kind of a little mini sermon to parents. And then we start seeing Moses grow up, and then he starts making some tough decisions. And when he had to choose, he chose, second of all, mistreatment with God's people over special treatment without them, without God, and or without God's people. We too have to choose when we follow Christ to identify with God's people, and that takes an act of faith. We even call it a profession of faith. And when we baptize, we are proclaiming our faith in front of others. We're identifying as God's people. The third thing that Moses had to do was he had to choose an ultimate treasure in heaven over temporary treasure on earth. And I talked about the incredible riches of Egypt, the access to fleeting pleasures of sin that he could have had, and he made a calculation that bearing the reproach of Christ was worth more than he had as an Egyptian royal. And the fourth decision that he made is through faith, is he chose a life with God in the wilderness over a wonderful life without him. And that kind of throws people off. So people think, well, you can never have a wonderful life without God. I think that's not true. I think you... well, I'll talk about that when I have a chance, but to explain that, and because he really could have had the most wonderful life of that day and time as an Egyptian royal, and he gave that up for a life in the wilderness with God. And then finally, faith chooses to trust in God's plan of salvation and nothing else. And that's when he chose, with the death angel coming, to just stay under the blood of the sacrificial lamb. And I ended just talking about how we have one plan of salvation, and we must trust it alone. So those are the 5 long points.
There you go.
We made it through it, but not in 3 minutes.
Not in 3 minutes.
No.
That's okay. We got some time
to
get the rust off.
Yeah.
For the 3
I
minutes.
should have left some of that sermon on the cutting floor, but I didn't.
Well, you told me you did in the 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Right? So you didn't get to all of it.
No.
So now I have a question. So I've always said you hone in on a point. Am I saying that wrong?
No, honing in is definitely shaving and carving and honing.
Okay.
Something you hone.
I lumped those things together. I thought they were honing pigeons who go to a point.
I always thought homing meant they went home.
Honing pigeons attack you.
With a sharp point. No, I guess that makes sense. They go home. Well, you really honed in on the faith decisions of Hebrews 11. I think that's so helpful, because that really is what we see over and over again.
Yeah.
And as I've talked about every week, none of these people had perfect faith. I mean, all of them were boneheads at times who
made bad
decisions. And the author of Hebrews looks at these good decisions of faith that they made. So I think that's really helpful. What's interesting is our sermons are so very different. So this is going to be great. So I'll start my 3-minute sermon recap starting now. So my main idea was that true faith leads to the right kind of fear. So I actually looked closely at the 2 expressions we get of Moses and his parents not fearing the king's edict, but recognizing they were people of fear. And so I talked about how we often think that faith is the absence of fear, and that to be a faithful person is to not have any fear at all. But the problem isn't that we fear. The problem is we fear the wrong things. And so true faith leading to the right kind of fear is what we see in Moses and his life and his parents. And so I just looked at a few things. What do faithful people fear? What don't faithful people fear? And the first thing we don't fear is we don't fear other people. And that's that perspective they have of not fearing the king's edict. His parents don't. And Moses doesn't fear the anger of the king. Why? Well, they knew who was actually the king. And I talked about how Paul would articulate this thousands of years later to the church in Rome as he wrote Romans 13. And every governing authority is appointed by God. It's not meant to be a compliment to the governing authority. It's meant to be a reminder of who's in charge, that God is the one who appointed them there. And Moses would learn this vividly through the Exodus, where he got to see God's power and control and might and sovereignty over Pharaoh and all the Egyptian gods in the plagues. And so just this we don't fear other people. We know who's in control. But the second thing is that faithful people don't fear suffering. And I looked at Moses' parents' decision to hide Moses, risking their death. But this emphasis that the author of Hebrews has on Moses choosing to be mistreated with the people of God, choosing the reproach of Christ over the pleasures of sin, over the wealth of Egypt. And thinking about in Moses' life, he had several moments where he chose suffering over comfort. And because he didn't fear suffering, he knew that if he was in God's will, it was what was best for him. And then I just wrapped up with, what do we fear? Well, faithful people fear God. We ultimately fear the Lord. And we see that in Moses' parents. They see that he's beautiful. They recognize he's been set apart by God. They're more concerned with God's plan than they are anything else. And so then I just gave some application, really just asking, what kind of fear do you have? Do you have a fear that's rooted in faith? Do you have a fear that is of the Lord? Or do you fear other people? Do you fear suffering? And then I just challenged our folks to grow in their knowledge of God, because as we grow in our knowledge of God, we grow in our fear of God. And when we grow in our fear of God, we draw closer to Him and we obey Him. But then also to act like they're not afraid, essentially. The challenge was to take a step like you aren't scared, even if you are. And we've got to do that more and more. Moses is scared. He's like, God, I can't even speak. How am I going to go speak to Pharaoh? But Moses acts. He makes a decision of faith to act from faith, even with fear present.
In spite of it, yeah.
And so I think we got to do that more and more. I also went over, and I felt like I was flying. I looked down. I thought I was going to have a minute left.
Yeah. Maybe time has sped up since we...
Yeah, maybe that...
Less.
I think that's probably the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we slowed down.
That's right. Well, after a week-long
I think we're homing in on it now, though.
We're homing.
Yeah.
We're homing.
Honing in on it.
All right. Well, hey, let's get into more of what we didn't say. That's what we did say. And we always want people to know what we did say on Sunday because it helps provide context, and we recognize we forget our sermons. So even if you were there on Sunday morning, you probably don't remember everything we said. And so we like to give the reference for what we did say before we talk about what we didn't say. But a little more about what we did say. I want to hear some sermon bloopers. It's been so long. Maybe even if you want to reach back into the archives, what are some recent sermon bloopers of yours? And if there's one from this Sunday, then perfect.
Yeah, I should have thought about that. I forgot about bloopers. I'm not on my game today.
No, that's all right.
I don't know, Bo. Do
you
you
wanna
remember
help
any
him out?
bloopers from me yesterday? Be careful, though. I mean,
I thought your sermon was almost perfect.
yeah, there you go.
Nothing that I can tell, but I just know that it's impossible to be perfect. So
Yeah.
we're gonna go almost perfect.
No, I think it was the main blooper was not getting these points a little more focused and maybe honing it down to 3 points or something like that. But it was hard to do that. But I don't think I stumbled on anything major yesterday, so that was good.
There you go.
How about you?
I think the only thing I did was I had 2 references that were dated references. And so our congregation at Southwest is mostly people 35 and younger. We've got some folks who are older than that, but we've got a pretty young crowd. And my opening illustration was I talked about Eloise being afraid of going down the drain because she was, for a time, like legitimately scared of going down the drain. And but I mentioned the Mr. Rogers song. You can never go down the drain. Have you heard this?
No, I haven't.
Well, there's multiple bloopers in there. I not only did I mention a Mr. Rogers song to a group of people who, unless they saw the Tom Hanks movie, probably don't know who Mr. Rogers was, but also I sang the Mr. Rogers song.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I'm not going to sing it because I won't make that mistake again. But so that was the first dated reference, and then the second one was I talked about Charlie Brown's teacher, the wah wah wah, that kind of because I've been really, I feel like the word has been leading us here over and over again to this theme of choosing the hard path that is obedient. And to the language of the Pilgrim's Progress, the hill of difficulty, choosing the hill of difficulty because it's what God's calling us to, and not choosing disobedience because it's comfortable. And I just feel like I've been making that point every week, and it was so clear in the text this week. This is what Moses did, and so I said, you probably think I sound like the Charlie Brown's teacher, wow, and it just could tell.
That didn't go.
95% of the people in the room were like, what is he talking about? So,
I was pretty sarcastic yesterday, a little bit like this current podcast. I was a little bit like that yesterday, and I was very dry in my humor, and it's hard for me not to be that way. A lot of innuendo and just dryness, and so I heard several times a smattering of laughter when I was being sarcastic, and so you got to be careful like that. Another blooper just did come to mind in the first service. I decided I was going to bring in this staff that I have in my office with the 10 Commandments carved into it and talk a little bit about Moses having to give up his staff. And I thought it was a good illustration. I'm jumping way ahead because this staff has the 10 Commandments on it. And to me, the picture of someone leaning on the 10 Commandments is a problem. That to throw that down is to say, I can't earn my salvation. I can't do it through the law. I've got to let go of my self-reliance. And so I think there's a good illustration there. And but I forgot to bring the staff up into there. So I went into it as a visual, and I just told him about the staff, and I kind of acted like I had it in my hand and threw it down. But then I realized because I didn't have the actual staff, and I shouldn't have probably mentioned the whole thing. I'm afraid maybe they got the idea that I was anti-law, antinomian, or whatever, that somehow I was saying we don't have to keep the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Bo was listening to that one.
That was actually his favorite part of the sermon.
Was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he's joking. Actually, it was. But you specifically said that doesn't mean we don't not keep the law.
Yeah.
So I think you cleared it up well.
So,
So you need to take that murder off your calendar, Bo.
Should I have made that a bigger illustration, or should I have left it out, Bo?
I think it was excellent. It would have been more excellent with the staff.
Yes.
But
so
I liked it.
Maybe, and this is a real blooper when you kind of half use a really good potential sermon illustration and you blow it. Now I feel like I can't come back to it.
You can't bring it back next Sunday
until I have people that forgot it, or I get confused and I think, well, I can use it with my 11 o'clock. They don't know anything about it. And it will be cool for them, but now I'm putting it on a podcast and all 30 of our listeners are going to know. We have more than 30.
That's
I don't know,
right.
after 2 months off, we may not.
Yeah, I mean, my mom's definitely listening.
I think my mom doesn't even listen anymore, but...
hey, that's okay. In 6 to 8 weeks, you'll be able to use it again.
Yes. It's coming back. Staff is coming back.
All right. Well, let's get into really the bulk of what we didn't say on Sunday, and we begin with historical context. And so much of the historical context of this passage is right on the page. I mean, you're reading history. This is what the author of Hebrews is doing. But anything for you that you didn't mention, that you didn't really dive into, that you want to dive into here?
I did not have nearly as much historical work prepared for this sermon because I was on vacation.
Yeah.
And but I would have loved to talk more about the differences between the faith of the Egyptians, the type of Egyptian religions, and him having to make a choice.
Yeah.
And talk more about the riches of it. And so I had done a little research into some of what they found in these pharaoh tombs of pharaohs, and it's just incredible the kind of life that Moses had access to.
Yeah.
I would love to have been able to illustrate that just a little bit more and make application into today, because I think we have wealth sitting here on my lap, this computer, that the pharaohs couldn't have even imagined.
Yeah.
But I really think there's a lot of application in these choices of Egypt, between Egypt and God being between America and the American culture and the American way of life and all the prosperity that we have. We haven't really been called to have to sacrifice that.
Yeah.
Would we?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to truly cut strings to the lucrative life we live, even the lower income of us, compared to life in a wilderness? So I would love to have had more time to expand on the make that choice more dramatic by talking about the nature of Egypt and the nature of the slavery that they were enduring. And I didn't get to talk much about the whole setup of the context of the people being in Egypt. Why were they in Egypt?
Yeah.
How long they had been there.
Yeah.
What that must have been like. There's so much there, but we're not preaching on Exodus.
No, we're not. That's the tricky thing. And even when we were preparing for this series, I think we both had the kind of idea that we'd be able to navigate both worlds really well. But these texts in Hebrews 11 are so rich that I felt each week like I've got enough here. Like I just need to exegete this. I can't spend time in Exodus to exegete that as well for to exegete it for our people, and so that pressure has been there, which my thing that was left on the cutting room floor, I mentioned it in passing, and this is literary context, but it's also historical context because it's literature that is history, and it's the story of Moses in comparison to the way the story is told in Hebrews 11, because I think there's some interesting tensions there where we're told he chooses to be mistreated with the people of God. And you read the story in Exodus, it looks like he gets angry and he just kills an Egyptian,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes on the run from Pharaoh because he's killed an Egyptian. And so much of Hebrews 11 is dealing with that tension of, we're told Sarah had faith, great faith that she would have a child, but she laughed.
Yeah.
Like she laughed when she was told she would have a child. And I think that's actually really encouraging, that as you talked about those faith decisions, that those are the things that we're personified by. It's not those moments of weakness, and it's possible that we act in faith while also acting in fear. Like those two things exist. We are complex. We're not simple like the Lord is, in the sense of the doctrine of simplicity and that all that is true about God is true about everything else. No, we have good and bad all mixed up together. And I think looking at that story of Moses, when he does leave Egypt, he's leaving on the run. But he's also choosing to be mistreated with God's people because he's defending an Israelite when he kills this Egyptian. And so I think that mixture of faith and fear, that mixture of what I would say is probably sin and godliness, I think is a helpful picture of how complex our life of faith can be.
Yeah.
But I didn't get into that at all.
No, and it's I didn't get to talk about. I think it's interesting. Did these verses get a little bit? You're kind of wondering, well, at what point did he refuse to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter? Was that at 40?
Yeah.
When he makes that choice to leave, or was it earlier? Then choosing to be mistreated. When was that? When he killed that Egyptian, or was that when he decided to come back?
Yeah.
But the point I think the author's making is he's not trying to give an accurate historical. He's showing this progression of what he thinks and what the Holy Spirit is leading us to see, that I think the readers of Hebrews are going through. They're facing these decisions with their children. They're facing decisions of, family decisions. I pointed that out. He had to leave what was a type of family in Pharaoh's house. And Jesus even talks about, I come to bring a sword that divides mother and father and mother from kids. And the gospel doesn't always unite families. Sometimes it divides them. And those are painful choices to make. And people have to make them. And these Jewish people that were considering following Christ were probably losing those family connections and losing the wealth that was set up for them in that family structure. And they saw Moses as a hero of the law and a hero of mighty deeds. But I love that this comes out and shows he was a hero of making tough calls, tough decisions that you and I have to make or will have to make in the future.
Yeah.
And I think it was interesting, people came up to me afterwards, after the service, saying, you really helped me with some decisions that I've got to make it work, that I've got to make with family. And the way that I helped them was not telling them how to make the decision. It was that you can make a decision even flawed as a person who is doubting. Because my scripture reading, I had the last words of the scripture reading that Bo read out of Exodus 4 was Moses looking at God and saying, Lord, please someone else. I love that.
Yeah.
Because here he is talking about a hero of faith, but here's how he went into it. Lord, please send someone else. But in the end, we hear in the Gospels, we see Jesus saying the same thing.
That's right.
He turns and says, "Father, if there's any way I don't have to drink this cup."
Yeah.
But his faith decision was, "Not my will, but thine be done." We see, and then I turn it and say, well, we all have to make that same exact decision to leave our people to follow God and go through the waters and go through the wilderness experience that might bring us.
Yeah.
But there's never really a great faith deed we won't have the faith deeds unless we make some of these faith decisions and reach our great potential. So there's good stuff all through the life and the history of Moses we could have used to illustrate that.
Well, I'll tell you this, with that in mind, this can really go one of two ways. I had a couple come up to me after the service and essentially tell me that because of my preaching, they were leaving the church. And
I've had that happen.
And I'm like, okay. But what they were saying was they've made a huge decision to move and to move to Auburn and make this big change for their family. And again, this theme we've been reiterating over and over again of choosing obedience, even if it's hard, even if it's challenging, even if it causes suffering. And that was helpful for them in making this decision. But sometimes when people tell you that your preaching is making me leave this church, it's for other reasons.
Yes.
I like it when it's the good reason.
Yes. I like it when it's a true step of faith. But
well, we already dove into some of the literary context. The story of Moses in Exodus is so much of the literary context of this passage, but also Hebrews 11 itself is rich. And one of the things I didn't point out at all, I just think this is a really cool thing, that we're told that Moses endured as seeing him who is invisible, and we're told faith is believing in things unseen at the beginning of Hebrews 11. And I love how the intro to Hebrews 11, the themes that the author of Hebrews introduces are interwoven all throughout the entire chapter. I think that's a really cool thing that he does. I didn't point that out at all. I don't really have anything else as far as literary context goes. Again, the literary context and the historical context are one and the same for this passage and for really all of Hebrews 11. But anything for you that you didn't mention?
I didn't. I would love to have been able to go back and point out how many times in Hebrews the author contrasts Moses with Jesus.
Yeah.
That's the big contrast.
Yeah.
He doesn't contrast Jesus with Abraham earlier, and others or Abel, but he or Cain. He contrasts him with Moses several times. I think that's a tension point with the Jews of that day. This is what they were relying on, and I talked about the law they would call the law of Moses, and so. I would like to have shown, and I didn't refer to several verses where the writer says Jesus is better. Moses was great, but Jesus is better.
Yeah.
And you need to make this choice. If you stick with Moses, he was great, but you're not even doing what Moses did if you stick with Moses. Because Moses made a faith decision in the unseen.
Yeah.
And
chose the reproach of Christ. And that really, for me, the big theological idea, if we want to go there, I didn't deal at all with how was it that Moses chose the reproach of Christ. Moses lived thousands of years before Jesus, but what the author of Hebrews does and the New Testament does over and over again is to show that the faith of our forefathers, the faith of Abraham, the faith of Isaac, the faith of Moses, the faith of Sarah and Rahab and all these people, their faith was ultimately in Christ because they had faith that God would fulfill his promise. And God's promises are fulfilled in Jesus. And so the author of Hebrews can easily say, well, he chose the reproach of Christ. He chose to be a part of God's family. But how pointed is that toward those who would choose Moses over Jesus when the author of Hebrews says, even Moses chose Jesus. Right. Like, I think that's such an incredible point that he's making. So anything for you theologically beyond that you didn't get to?
I think that was really, I touched on it, but I think you're making one of the key points is how do we choose the reproach of Christ today in our life? And a lot of that is our faith decision. It's not just the initial decision to say, hey, I'm a Christian. The next decision to say, I'm going to be baptized. But we are the body of Christ every day in our everyday lives. And we bear the reproach of Christ by living out our life as salt and as light. It's going to bring persecution, going to bring some reproach. It may bring all sorts of joys, and it may, we don't know. But we have to make that choice, even when it's tough. Faith will always choose God, and even the reproach that comes with God, when those faith. Now, if we choose the other way, which we will, it's not a faith decision; it's a fear decision, and a flesh decision. But faith, true faith, always chooses God, and but we are completely capable of choosing outside of faith.
Yeah. With
little faith, and but I gave an illustration that I think was helpful to some, in that, especially businessmen, in that I bear sometimes the reproach of Christ when people find out what I do, and sometimes I was just honest that sometimes I don't even want to tell people in certain environments.
Yeah,
I hope they don't ask me what I do, and that's kind of sounds like I'm ashamed of Christ, but it's really not, because I'm living an example at that time. I'm not doing anything to be ashamed of. But when I play golf with people or some strangers, spend time with them, and then after 2 or 3 hours, it's revealed what I am. They think quickly over that last 3 hours what they need to repent of
That's
and
right.
be sorry for. And a little bit, as a Christian, you bear that reproach. It's not a bad thing, but it is sometimes frustrating to feel different. But when you choose Christ, you're choosing to feel and be different.
Yeah.
You cannot help that.
Yeah.
And you can't be ashamed of it, but also said you don't turn around and you don't gloat about it. I don't walk up on the tee time and say, hey, guys, I'm a man of God, so be careful.
That's right.
And where's the balance in there? That's what every believer has to find.
Yeah.
We don't want to bring unnecessary reproach on ourselves, reproach on Jesus for acting like obnoxious people, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's, we've talked about this. It's coming more and more.
The price we have to pay.
The price we have to pay is getting greater. And I mean, there are people that I know, there are people that are in our circles right now who have lost their jobs because of their faithfulness to the gospel and their faithfulness to convictions about gender or sexuality or whatever that may be. And so it's the price is increasing.
Yeah.
And nominal Christianity is decreasing because of that. Because if it's not convenient to be a Christian and I'm not sold out on being a Christian, then why do it? I'm quick to tell folks, especially businessmen and women that have those tough positions, pastors, we have it pretty easy. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll be the last ones, I think, to lose our jobs over Christianity.
You know what's funny? This came to me on Sunday. I was talking about this and just trying to empathize, and I said, some of you could lose the gospel. I did say that.
Yeah.
That's a sermon blooper. Some of you could lose your jobs for sharing the gospel. I would lose my job for not sharing the gospel.
That's a good point.
So it's kind of an opposite experience.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, anything else? Any illustrations or stories? You said you had a lot, but you want to save those.
Well,
for later sermons.
I am going to probably save it, but one that I probably won't talk about because I didn't get to read the book. I was frustrated on my vacation. I had a big biography of Abraham Lincoln, and I've always wanted to read a biography on him, and I got a really good one. I got about 100 pages in out of 400. I hope to have read the whole thing, but he had to make some really tough decisions, and I was hoping to pull out some of those incredible decisions that here's this country boy lawyer who wanted to be a politician, wanted to get into that, but then ended up being in at the most critical time in our nation's history. And his decisions were, well, we have monuments of him in Washington because he made some incredibly important and good decisions, and some of them were faith decisions. Even though he battled with some of his beliefs, he really made some faith-based decisions in that. And then you watched the movie. I was going to maybe tie the two together, Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
So Truman had to make a decision to drop an atomic bomb based on life.
Yeah.
Which one is going to save the most lives? You know, that or a prolonged invasion of Japan, ground invasion, which is going to be worse on Japan. And so we have all these kind of decisions. So I wanted a cool illustration out of both of those, but they're coming.
They're coming.
They're
all right.
coming. I'll have some cool quotes, but so did Oppenheimer get into that little bit, those tough decisions?
I would say, yeah, big time.
About how nuclear the bomb's going to change the world, basically.
That's 80% of the kind of theme of the movie is that. And there's an incredible scene. There's only one scene with Truman. Yeah. And it's incredible.
Yeah.
Gary Oldman plays Truman. I don't know if that's a spoiler because I think he's a cameo, but anyways, we could do a whole episode on that. But I imagine that illustration will be explosive.
Oh,
See
yeah.
what I did there?
He had to drop a joke. It's bad.
All right. Well, hey, that's all. I don't have anything else to share. You're good?
I'm good.
All right. It's been great to be back.
It is. It's always fun.
I look forward to finding a groove again. And we thank you for those who are watching, for those who are listening. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for being back on it. We're going to try and be consistent again, just to project in the future. It's kind of always the way it's going to be in the summer. We might even want to think about seasons because, like, season 1 of What We Didn't Say on Sunday, season 2, that kind of thing, because the summer's just going to be hard to be consistent. But the fall is almost here as far as the semester goes, not the season. And that brings some consistency to our lives, and will bring some consistency to the podcast. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and give us a 5-star review if you think we're worth it. If you don't think we're worth it, don't review
Do it
us.
anyway.
Don't listen to him.
No way.
Don't review us. 5-star review or nothing, right, Bo? That's what we want. 5-star review or nothing. But anyways, with all of that said, we're going to preach again on Sunday.
By faith.
By faith, we're going to preach again. And we're going to have things we didn't get to, things left on the cutting room floor. And we'll be back next week to share with you what we didn't say on Sunday.